O-O-T-C. Hey, that's cool.
You got a podcast?
Well, I didn't know that.
That's cool.
Now you do.
Welcome. We are back. Oh, that's cool. OTC's very own podcast. Here to talk about the great people that we work with at OTC. I, of course, am Jared Durden, and with me, as always,
As your co-pilot on this rewarding mission of ours, my name is Andrew Crocker. And Jared, we have talked a little bit about how nice it is to be back in the swing of things. And today was the swingiest day of all. Now, just those of us listening to us are listening to us in the future, but today is September 17th. It was the picnic. It felt as close to normal as it has felt since we've kind of come back during this pandemic. What were your thoughts today? Did you get a chance to check it out?
I did. I got to stroll through, see everybody. I've had different varying amounts of participation in the picnics, and on this picnic, I got to be a participant, and it was great to see everybody. It was exciting to see you and your students as well. Specifically, my first realization of you being at the picnic was a post I saw on Facebook where you guys are doing voter registration.
That's right.
How'd that go? How'd the booth go?
We registered over 20 students to vote.
Fantastic.
I assume they were all students. We registered all comers. And that is really one of the things that's really excited us this year, me and Kara Griffin, who both co-sponsor Politically Active, is a theme I've cut back to you again. I don't know if this semester is better than any semester I've ever had, but it just seems like it. I don't know if it is. It might just be we have been disconnected and remote for a year, and now we're back at it, and everybody's raring to go, and everybody's amazing, or it just feels amazing that we're back in the normal groove. Which do you think it is? Do you think it's just been a while, and now that we're back in the groove, it feels amazing, or do you think everybody's just a little extra amazing right now?
To quote my grandma, maybe it's both.
Yeah.
And often we don't, we forget that two things can be true at the same time, right? I'm kind of leaning that way. I feel like my appreciation has grown because of my own experience, but I can also see how, the students as well would appreciate being able to interact and maybe having, that change of pace kind of gets everybody raring,
Jared, question on everybody's mind. Everybody who's listening right now, how much dancing did you do?
I didn't know.
They were playing a lot of music. I was pretty hot in our 20s today.
I know. I'm sorry. I didn't.
You didn't feel the urge?
I'm not going to say I don't ever dance, but today I did not.
You seem like a spry guy. You seem like a guy that has a little...
It's just the tiger shirt right now.
Okay.
Is all that is
It's
giving
an
off
optical illusion.
It really is.
I got you.
Did you dance?
I did. I shimmied.
Sure.
What I will typically do is usually when I walk to the food, I'm walking through a crowd of people who are much better dancers.
Sure.
And that shames me from dancing myself, but I will shimmy a bit.
I think that's just how we refer to dancing when we're over 30. Right?
I'm only human.
Right.
You give me a awesome beat that I probably used to dance to in my 20s, I'll dance to it now. But I've kind of come down in my old age. I'm more of a shimmier.
I noticed you got a button.
I do. Well, today
it's not just the fall picnic. What else is going on?
It's also Constitution Day. And so we kind of married the two. We did a whole bunch of Constitution work in our classes today, and we also handed out some Constitutions today. We had a Constitution scavenger hunt. We posted all 10 of the Bill of Rights across campus, and if you could retrieve them all, we would give you a giant inflatable eagle. It looked like a giant inflatable swan, but nonetheless, nobody was able to do that. It was kind of like the, you remember the McDonald's Monopoly?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think a couple of our amendments were tucked away in Lincoln, and nobody could track them down. But like we were getting returns from like ICE and NKM and such. And also, I should mention, it's amazing people found those flyers at all because we had an extraordinary event today on campus. The power cutout, the entire power cutout for the region, not for OTC, but for Drury, for Evangel. It was absolutely insane. And did you have class during that?
Oh, no. I didn't have a class today.
I was printing an exam.
I was printing an exam
and it stopped halfway through.
I was actually thinking about the other day, those kind of events that you don't expect and kind of what comes of it. Because I remember one summer we had some construction going on and there was kind of a gas leak scare, and so like everybody was evacuated.
Yes,
and we've had issues where power goes out and things like that, and it's always kind of an interesting challenge, but kind of an interesting way to see how kind of students interact after that point and finding new ways to adapt to it.
Oh, my students loved me, man. I loved going in and telling them, well, we can't have an exam today because we have no papers. There's no light anyways. And I'm already feeling balmy. There's no air conditioning. And so I had called it and they were all like, hooray. And off they went on the weekend. I was, the educator in me broke a little bit.
So does this mean just test on Monday?
Yes. Yeah. So all they've done is this is just delayed misery for them. But hey, you've escaped the butcher's knife for a day.
So we have another fantastic guest today, someone that Andrew and I have gotten to work with before, and someone who is part of the well, actually, I'll let her introduce all that. Our guest today is Michelle Ciesielski, not to be confused with KSMU's Michelle Ciesielski, which I actually confused you with the first time I met you.
We're totally separate people.
Well, you do have that very NPR.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Yeah.
Soothing cadence.
Yeah. I met her one time and I was like, oh my gosh, everybody thinks I'm you. She's like, I've never heard of you. I was like, oh, that's cool. I still love you. So I'm a fan.
Her loss, if you ask me.
Yeah. Well,
you play, first of all, just FYI to all three of us and everybody listening, Jared and Michelle and I are trying really, really hard not to let this podcast go 4 hours because all three of us are big time talkers, which is why I'm so crazy about you. You and I don't interact that often, but every time we do, I'm like, there's like a sister from another mister right there. You play such an integral role on campus. What is your role?
So I'm actually the director of Veterans Upward Bound. We're a federal grant program. We came around in 2017. We're in our 5th year of our grant cycle. And what I do is I basically run a program that helps veterans go back to school. So this is to any school. A lot of our vets choose OTC because it's a great place to be, but we want to help vets go wherever they want to go.
Now, when I always give my students a syllabus exercise, and one of the things our syllabus always mentions is reach out for military and veteran services, or however that phrase goes. Can you give us a rundown? What are the services that we offer our military and our veteran students?
So it's kind of interesting. Veterans Upward Bound is different than vet services and military. The office, the certifying official plays a very different role in a veteran's academic experience than Veterans Upward Bound. Veterans Upward Bound is a pre-collegiate program. And what we do, we try to capture veterans before they go into school so we can help make the right decisions with them, give them the information to empower them to best use their benefits, put them on the right path for a career and their academics. Once they're in school, they really learn to rely upon the veteran services, which is the certifying official. And those are the people that, certify their classes with the VA and help them get connected with other resources too. And of course, our vets always come back to us once they're in school. Our doors are always open. We're here for vets. We want to see them graduate. That's our ultimate goal for them.
What led you to it?
To Veterans Upward Bound?
To position the career you're in now.
Yeah. So I actually started in homeless youth services, and I really liked helping youth apply to go to college because that was such a big deal in my life. So then eventually, I think I tried to apply for a few jobs in higher ed. The door never opened. So I went back and got my master's in student affairs and learned about TRIO programs. Eventually, after I graduated with my degree in student affairs and higher ed, I went to Arkansas, worked for a TRIO program, got experience working with at-risk students, personally, it's just what the Department of Education deems at risk. A lot of them are just normal students, We all kind of struggle through school at various times, but
no question.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And what exactly is a TRIO program?
A TRIO program, it focuses on accessibility. So making sure higher education is accessible to students and they can complete it. So I worked in Arkansas with college students from the time they entered college to the time they graduated, helping them transition transfer. I worked at another community college, but then I eventually got called back to OTC. I worked here as a part-time advisor in graduate school. And when I heard they had a Veterans Upward Bound grant on the table, I had to come back.
And for my money, and you and I have agreed to disagree on this point, I think you have the best office on campus. I love that your little perch that you have. It's right above the Starbucks. You get to look across the whole the whole atrium.
Yeah.
I just think you have a great little spot there.
Yeah, I spend a lot of money on Starbucks, which is the downfall, but
your office could have like a bank tube set up from the Starbucks that you're right above it.
I've requested that, but it's still pending.
I'm going to stereotype veterans right now, and I want you to agree or disagree. My personal experience dealing with hundreds, maybe thousands of students over the years is that veterans generally have the best sense of humor.
Oh, definitely. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You can really like talk straight with them, and they just don't miss a beat. You know, they prefer it that way.
That is almost a defense mechanism just to cut the constant tension that they must deal with.
Oh, yeah.
But it's such a relief to have in the classroom and in life. I love dealing with them.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And, you know, we have actually a Veterans Lit Mag that we've produced, and there was a really good story in there about humor. And one of the vets just reflected on humor through war, essentially, and how it is kind of a coping mechanism. And it's a really good story. Highly encourage you guys to check it out. It's on the website. If you go to otc.edu/VUB, you can link to our Lit Mag and read it there.
Can you give that one more time?
Yeah, it's otc.edu/VUB.
And this is an online publication that's made right here at OTC?
Yeah, so that came out in 2019. Our 2020 issue never happened, for COVID reasons. But we've got another issue coming out in 2021, hopefully. We actually have hard copies of the 2019 issue. If anybody wants to pick them up, they can swing by the office.
Fantastic.
Michelle, question on everybody's mind. How much dancing did you do at the picnic?
Okay, so I know. This guy's holding out on me, but I know you will. I danced like when I was in the booth, like in our little table for VUB. Yeah. But I will say, you guys talking about living your best lives and this is the best semester. And it's like, but you are not dancing. How does that work? You raise an interesting point. I did shimmy. I did bring some of me to the table. I'm not like Jared over here who's trouncing his inner child by refusing to even tap his foot.
It wasn't a refusal. It just it was happenstance. It just didn't come up.
How many shows do you go to? We just had Jeff Johnson not that long ago. How many shows do you go to on a regular basis? Though you hit the scene. You're on the scene.
It was a lot more before the last year, of course. And I guess I feel a little personally attacked, but. I can take valid criticism. Maybe this is something I need to work on. From what I've seen too, from I've got my stepson's in high school, and from what I've seen of TikTok and current trends, though, most of the dancing seems to be with the hands.
Yes,
and so I think I could work with.
And
this.
I'll cut back to Michelle's question. I've actually found myself dancing less since I discovered TikTok, because I have always had the impression that I was a good dancer for many, many years. And then I watch the people on TikTok and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
To be a good dancer, it's just confidence.
Yes, that is wrong.
Just confidence.
That is wrong. I have seen confident dancers.
And they're always the best, right? All eyes on them, right?
Well, there's this second part to confidence where you just don't care what other people think too, right?
Okay, yeah, you're right.
Because if you dance like no one's watching, people are in a public place are still watching.
Yeah.
Right.
On the staff side of things, we focus on the faculty, but on staff side of things, how has the return of some degree of normalcy been for you this semester?
Okay, I was just speaking about this with somebody else, and this is absolutely an awesome semester, I think, too. And I don't know if it's been, even the summer was a little slower than normal, and I just wasn't sure what to expect, but it just feels like full swing again, really, and we're loving it. Yeah, it's great to see us.
Does it feel like, and I've mentioned this in a previous episode, does it feel like the campus is shot out of a cannon? It feels like everybody, in my limited window of experience, wants to throw in a little extra elbow grease. And like when it comes to the cabinet for politically active, again, the student group that I co-sponsor, sometimes getting these students who are not living on campus to come out and participate in the thing, like, takes a little arm twisting. We have to grease the rails a little bit. And it's not been that case. They have been banging down our door to do activities.
That's awesome. Yeah. We've got some engagement with our veterans happening too. And our veterans lounge is opening back up this semester. They're working on that. So our vets are psyched about it.
And there are several throughout campus. I'm familiar with one on the first floor of NKM.
That's
I've
the
had
one
students.
I know,
Yep. So the Norman K. Meyer, that is the veterans lounge open to all OTC veteran students. And then we have a veterans academic lab for veterans upward bound participants. So typically you have to be a participant to use all the services in that lab. But I mean, we're not going to turn a veteran away. If they need help, come on to our lab. We're more than happy to help you.
And where is that lab in particular?
That is Information Commons West, room 217.
Are you a veteran yourself?
I'm not. I'm 100% civilian. My dad served in the Air Force, but yeah, I love working with veterans.
Is there such a thing as an Air Force brat? I know they always call it the Army brat. But.
I actually didn't even know my dad served until I was in high school. I mean, yeah, he served before I was born, and it just really kind of kept it close to his chest, you know?
Wow.
Yeah.
I actually, my step-grandpa, my stepdad, my brother, my uncle, my grandfather on my mother's side, all military, either Marines or Army or Navy.
Awesome.
And so I was actually the first male in my family not to go into military service.
Wow.
Which was kind of an opportunity that, I feel like that they provided as well, right? But
has there been internal discussion about that dynamic in your family? There's been everybody kind of wants to see their kids walk some sort of path that comes close to what they did. Any of them ever apply pressure on that front?
Not at all. And, I appreciate that as well. And I really enjoy, kind of hearing those stories and experiences, because I think the question we're really going to get down to today is, from someone who's never had that experience, kind of talking about, well, what is it that we don't understand, or what is it that if we understood better would allow us to serve those students and to be better citizens, and community members with those people. But before we get into that, you've told us a lot about your education and how you got into being a part of Upward Bound and kind of your role here at the college. Tell us a little bit about yourself outside of that. So what don't people know about you, or what might we find interesting about you, or what do you just enjoy about you? Yeah,
I love being outside. So if it involves going outside, I'm probably down to do it. I like riding my bike a lot. One of my favorite activities that I've done in my lifetime is ragbri. Have you guys heard of ragbri?
I'm sorry. Ragbri?
Yeah. Okay. So it's an acronym. The Register's Annual Great Bike Ride Across Iowa.
Okay.
So it's just a 7-day bicycle ride with 20,000 of your closest friends cycling across Iowa and sleeping in people's yards and eating at vendors, and
Phenomenal.
Church ladies are making you spaghetti and pie, and it's a pretty good time. So
there was a similar thing a friend of mine almost roped me in on, almost being the operative word, where you can canoe the Missouri River.
The Missouri 340?
Yes.
Yep.
So I'm going to one-up you both here.
Okay.
My uncle I mentioned, who was a Marine, is somewhat of an extremist when it comes to adventure, I guess, or because after the Marines, I remember for a while he did parachuting, and he worked at Mount Vernon, was actually like packed parachutes and did a ridiculous number of jumps. Now he does, he's sponsored by Coat, and he does gravel and bike races, but he does the Trans Iowa, so he goes across Iowa in 27 hours.
Yeah, ours is 7 days. There's no way.
I'm on your team, right? I'll do it in 7 days. We did the Katy Trail, and we did it over 5 days. But
it's like a ride, not a race.
He does these gravel races where it's like you just are on a bike for 27 hours straight.
Yeah. I did a bike ride. I did Ragbri one year. And then the next, later, about a month or two later, I did Hotter in Hell, which is in Texas in August.
Oh, wow.
And I was in a RAGBRAI mindset, and it was the worst physical thing I've ever done in my life. Texas and 105-degree heat, and you're just trying to finish in time. And if you don't make a checkpoint, they reroute you, and it's like, oh my gosh, I did not finish, but that's okay. Spent too much time at those rest stands eating granola bars and drinking water.
You got to do a Tough Mudder. Have you done a Tough Mudder?
No,
So I have done one of those. And
does that involve running?
It does involve some running, although after a while you're limping. So there's lots of it's obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. It involves a ton of teamwork. It's great if you go with a team, which I was fortunate enough to. You're going over walls that are too tall to do by yourself, mud hills that are too slippery to scale by yourself. You're going over rails. You're going into ice baths, swimming across ice baths. There is one moment where the worst part of it is probably the electroshock wires. You got to run through a gauntlet of those.
That's usually most stories I hear. It's the worst part's the electric shock.
I know.
That seems to be consistent.
That was the worst part. Probably.
I am intrigued though, and I've actually wanted to do one of those. Just for the experience.
We'll make it an episode of. Oh, that's cool. We got to find ourselves a patsy to go with us.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, we'll rope in Ciesielski.
Yeah.
Would you be interested in
I don't.
Mudder?
Do you have to do all of it, or do they break up each little?
You can walk around a thing. I have a buddy of mine that works. He sells. Actually, my brother-in-law sells electronics here in town. He's legitimately shocked himself for real many, many times. So he's like, "I'll just walk around the electroshock stuff." But I went through it, and there's a couple different activities. The worst one was you're having to what's it when you're crawling? It's called
the army
army crawl. Yeah,
yeah.
You're doing an army crawl beneath these dangling wires that are just too low for you to realistically avoid, and it feels like a warm pop on your back. It doesn't feel good. And
Sure.
I remember crawling through it, and the guy in front of me is my stepbrother. He's ahead of me. He finishes. He stands up. He puts his arm out for me, and I reach as far as I can for his arm, and I just lay there, and then I realize I'm 7 feet away from him.
Crawl back in and
psychologically, I was so ready to be done that my body's like, just let him do all the work.
I think it's the wall I would struggle with. I'm like,
It's not so bad if you got a team.
Yeah, that's what everybody says. But I would find a way to be weak enough to just bring the whole team down. The team would stop at the wall.
So, do you have kind of like a professional bike gear or certain things you like, or is it?
No, I have I bought my bike on Craigslist, which was probably a bad idea because it doesn't quite fit me right. But there's other things besides biking I do. I like backpacking, hiking. I do that quite a bit. So
what's your favorite place in the area, or where do you like to go regularly?
Anywhere in Arkansas is usually pretty beautiful. So I've done the Buffalo River Trail.
Hilly.
What?
Hilly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So in fact, usually when I am not hiking overnight or something, I'll try to find a hill on the weekend and put on a heavy pack and just go up and down that. Good training.
I was one of my favorite things about the Olympics is the cultural differences, and they had mountain biking in the Olympics, and Switzerland swept the podium stand. Because I was like, in Switzerland, that's just biking.
I know.
It's not biking in Switzerland, it's just biking. They swept the podium stand. When you and I were chatting earlier today, you had actually told me a couple interesting things about yourself. And one of them is that you're really obsessed with how art and, what did you say, veteran service collide? You had said you were into
more social justice and art. I'm on Instagram, and my feed is all mostly artists and textile artists specifically. So looking at embroidery, quilting, it all sounds very boring, I'm sure, but it's like if you get into it, like the modern embroidery, modern quilting and cross stitch, there's some pretty incredible stuff out there. Some very impactful pieces of artwork that you just aren't going to see on your grandmother's bed.
A few episodes ago, we had Craig Granger on, and he was talking about the gardening community. And I imagine there's got to be a small but passionate group of people that are kind of interested in like the embroidery and how you can work in. You tend to think of embroidery, somebody like me who has really no interest in it generally. I don't do anything with it. Just think of it as kind of old-fashioned and doilies, but it's extremely modern. The art concerning it is it's very immediate.
Yeah. I follow this like quilter named Thomas Nauer, and he is a really cool guy to follow because he takes a lot of current events and like has like social commentary, and he makes quilts on it. So it's just really
Nauer.
Yeah. That's Knaur.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So something we like to ask to get to know everybody is there a hero you have or an inspiration, someone you look up to, or someone you would just like our listeners to know about that they may not know about?
Oh, that's a tough question. I was not prepared for that.
Nauer is a good start.
Yeah. Can I table this?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right.
Sure,
I'm going
if
to
you think of one
you
later.
know, maybe as we start talking, I'll things will come to me.
This is your episode.
Yeah. Okay.
You run the
Full
ship
control.
Here. Yeah.
Okay, so when you were a kid, when you had recess, and I want to remind everybody, we were more restricted on those options as children, right? And so the idea that we don't still have recess now, like we can just pretty much whenever we want go out and do these things, right?
We can, yeah.
What was your go-to game in recess?
Oh my gosh. All right. This is like probably kind of embarrassing, but you know, when you were a kid, like just tag, but it was like boys versus girls sort of thing where it was like boys chase girls and then the girls turn around and chase boys. And you like, I think we called it Jurassic Park at the time.
Sure.
Just because that was what was popular.
Okay.
But yeah. So I'm definitely going to say just the running around screaming.
I would imagine that you anchored that women's girls tag team. I imagine you anchored it.
Yeah,
You
well, I
dragged them
definitely,
to victory.
I mean, there was a lot of screaming, so, you know, just like banshees running around.
This wasn't connected to the electrocution thing, was
No,
it? There was
not-
no
yeah.
wires dangling or, okay. The screaming was
No
more-
walls to climb.
Yeah.
Well, I think I probably could climb them when I was that young, though.
So the penultimate question then, the antepenultimate question, are you familiar with Gumby and are you familiar with Mr. Ed?
Gumby, yes. Is Mr. Ed the one that, like, got torn apart?
No, that was...
It was Mr. Ed. You mean from Saturday Night Live?
Yes, what was his name?
Oh, Mr. Bill or something.
Mr. Bills,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
someone had mentioned him in a different episode. Mr. Ed was, in the 50s, a horse that could talk that was in a situational comedy.
It sounds familiar.
So just imagine a horse that has the ability to talk.
Okay,
He
yeah,
wears shorts
yeah.
sometimes. He can surf.
How much Nick at Night you grow up on?
We didn't have cable.
Okay.
So Gumby versus Mr. Ed, battle to the death. Who wins?
I'm going to go definitely the horse, Mr. Ed, because Gumby's like just a tiny little green guy, right?
He does
You
have the
just
size
eat 'em up.
disadvantage.
Yeah. I mean, what is Gumby bringing to the table?
So, devil's advocate, because I'm the Gumby stan of this particular podcast. He's got reach.
The horse, is that the horse?
No, Gumby.
Oh, reach.
He's got reach. He's extendable, and I believe he's got no consistency. You can't crush or kill him. I think your best shot might be to trap and suffocate him, but I don't even know if he relies on oxygen. There's a whole lot of the Gumby.
So what happens when Mr.
There's
Ed
a whole
eats
lot of-
Gumby, and then it's like,
Gumby.
does he like still like just exist in his
forgot he
stomach?
could- I forgot he could eat Gumby.
Yeah, because he's green. Horses will eat green things. Yeah,
Well, now we're
Gumby
just
doesn't
assuming-
have a chance.
Now we're just assuming that Gumby won't defend himself going down the horse gullet. I don't know. That's great.
He's like punching his insides as he goes.
I'm just, I think I'm waiting for the recognition of the bravery we have to ask these questions.
No,
Right?
no,
Like, no
nobody
one
is
else.
asking these questions.
No
Literally no one.
No other Ozark Technical Community College based podcast is asking who is winning in these fictitious battles between fictitious characters.
Yeah. You hear that, Jeff Johnson?
That's
You
right.
have thrown the gauntlet down, my friend. The Rock Farm is too chicken to take on the question of Gumby versus Mr. Ed.
This is an aggressive episode.
I know. I came
Is
out
it the
firing.
picnic? Like,
It was. I'm full of food. I got soda in my system. I've been in the sun for a while. I'm ready to go.
So, Michelle, we brought you here for a much more serious question, or at least probably a more interesting one. with your experience and with the work you do, as a civilian, what can we learn from the veteran experience, and what might we really not understand about the veteran's experience?
Yeah. So as a civilian myself, I really have stood back and I just seek to understand our veterans. I don't want to speak for our veterans, but, as a civilian, I do feel like I'm an advocate for them. I think mainly, we had the discussion the other day and just in our office about what do you do, do our veterans like it when you thank them for their service? And just,
That I have wondered that myself. How do we thank a veteran for their service? Is saying thank you enough? My impression is I don't think so.
So the consensus is not always agreed upon. Some veterans really do like to be thanked for their service, and other veterans don't. They feel what they've done is not service. It's just a job. They signed up to do a job and they did it, like what thanks do they need? Others feel like, they did not sacrifice as much. So why do they need thanks? So my position on it is, should I thank a veteran for their service? I don't say the words thank you for your service, but I try to lean into that and, ask about their military experiences, ask what branch they served in, what they did in the military. And I try to just kind of meet them where they are and show an interest in what, in their past experiences. And if they want to tell me more, awesome. And if they don't, that's awesome too.
That's a theme that dovetails with what Daniel Oganyemi would share with us a few episodes ago, was the best way to listen to somebody is to ask them a bunch of questions, ask them where they're from, get their perspective behind you. It's probably the best way. It's an act. Mm-hmm. It's an act is listening. It's not passive.
Yeah. And I think thank you for your service for some veterans is a very passive way. It's like they don't even realize what I did and they're just being like, oh, thanks, So I think the more questions you ask, appropriate questions, there are some questions you don't want to ask a veteran, but asking, the right questions and just really being open to that veteran experiences goes a long, long way with our vets.
And cutting back to Jared's question, what is it about the veteran experience that might surprise civilians? Veterans, people in the military make up roughly 1% of the population. So us 99%. What are we missing?
I think a lot of civilians don't realize how hard a transition back into civilian life is. Veterans, they're taken into boot camp, and really boot camp kind of breaks down your individuality. You are not, the individual, you are a team, you have a mission. So you are working in a unit together, and depending on how long you do that for, whether it's a veteran who maybe gets through boot camp and unfortunately has to get discharged because maybe they got injured, or if it's a veteran who has 22 years of service and retires,
what might a veteran experience that the rest would surprise us?
Yeah, so that transition, no matter how long they've been in the military, they have that mindset. And coming back into civilian life is very different than military life. There's not always that clear-cut, black and white, we know what to do, chain of command. The mission isn't always clear in civilian life. When you're in the military, you have that real sense of purpose, that you're working on something, that you're achieving a mission. But when you come back to civilian life, I think we all kind of struggle with what do I want to do with my life? What am I going to be when I grow up? But I think that's really intensified for veterans because they've had such an intense experience, and they may have been overseas and deployed, or they may have, been supporting missions of our service members overseas. So coming back into civilian life is a total 180. It's like you live as a civilian, you become someone else, and then you're expected to go back and be a civilian.
I read this book, War, by Sebastian Junger, one of my favorite books I've ever read. And he talked about serving in a forward operating base in Afghanistan and how the kids serving out there, there's almost no discussion of grander missions. But when you're operating weaponry that's worth more than you'll make in a year against opponents who will never make that much in a lifetime, the grand scheme, whatever, maybe you have a good grasp on it, maybe you don't. Maybe you don't even agree with it, but you feel like you're important. You feel like you are a part of a mission, of a purpose. And as you said, rediscovering that or trying to replace that hole that leaves you, that becomes inside you once you leave military service, what role do you have in trying to find ways to fill that hole?
Yeah, a lot of veterans, maybe as a civilian, we think like, oh, it would be easier to find a purpose if they just did this or did that. But it's not, because as a veteran, you've got your unit, you've got your brothers and your sisters alongside of you the whole time. But when you are taken out of that military, you're very isolated in your civilian life. And like your spouse might not understand, your children don't understand. Friends and other family may not. So what I work to do is, veterans who are interested in trying school, we try to just make that transition as best we can with them. So providing the support, I think having that academic lab, and we have vets on staff with Veterans Upward Bound, and having people who just know, we all have some sort of identity. I think that, when we meet somebody with the same identity, there's a connection there. With veterans, that is so, so deep. So veterans being able to connect with other veterans in higher education is going to make them more successful. And that's what we aim to do.
Have you spent a lot of time thinking about what we as a people can do more for our veterans?
I mean, definitely awareness. I think there's a lot of things that we do that affect, policies that are made that can affect veterans. I think, it's always in the news. You hear about, veteran suicide rates. 22 veterans die by suicide each day. So
a day?
A day. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry, 22?
Mm-hmm. Do you know how that compares to statistics of non-veterans?
I don't. I can't say that I do. But I mean, the suicide rates are very high, especially in like people who haven't been deployed are even more at risk of suicide. And in fact, September is, and by the time you hear this, was Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. So not being scared to like talk to veterans, especially if you notice them isolating, just asking them, don't be afraid to have those tough conversations and know that you're there to support them. But then there's other things like on a higher macro level, that we can influence with our politicians, and being sure that veterans are being put first and not just as kind of like bargaining chips in politics, but that real change is being made on those levels.
That's a really good point that you raise. In particular, that's something men in general struggle with. People who serve in the military, I would imagine, have a lot of trouble opening up about their experiences. Especially, if their impression of civilians is that you just don't get the experiences I had, and even if I describe them to you, you still might not. You might intellectually understand it, but viscerally, it's lost on you because you haven't been there. And in a way, much of the field of our therapists and our psychologists and our psychiatrists are just like the rest of society. They are overwhelmingly civilian. And so they can find trouble. I think just on a numerical level, they will have trouble finding people with shared experiences and such. Do you think part of the problem here is that we're not properly funneling them to other veterans that might be able to? I know that's part of what we do here at OTC is create a culture among veterans. I think that can only help.
Yeah. I have thought about this before, and I think as civilians, we have a bigger role to play than we think we do. I think civilians really are just more likely to be like, oh, well, I'm not a veteran. Sorry, I don't understand. But it's like, your veteran still cares about you, and you should, like, of course we care about our veterans, but like, how much do we care, And I mean, it's just at the end of the day, we're both human, and veterans understand that. And I hope that civilians understand that, there's something called moral injury, which moral injury is not the same as PTSD. It's where you are you've got a set of morals. You are taken to a place and you are expected to do things, perhaps like our veterans have done, where, those morals sometimes have to be set aside. And what was like in this world okay or not okay to do is now suddenly, you're doing this and like for a mission, and to protect a unit and like for a bigger cause. So then when you get out of that situation and back into that original world that you came from, there is kind of a spiritual injury, a moral injury, and kind of figuring out how to heal that is really important. So, I think not only are veterans having PTSD, which is psychological, but I think they have a lot of moral and spiritual injury they are working through.
Would you describe it as more moral and spiritual desensitization? I didn't say that word right. How do you say that word? Desensitivation?
Desensitization?
Desensitized, whatever the Asian version of that word.
Desensitization.
Yeah.
Or, let me ask that question from the start with minus my verbal diarrhea. Would you say it's like desensitizing of morality or hypersensitive to morality that is causing this moral injury? Or is it both, as Jared might say?
I feel like morality is more a constant thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then when something happens or you do something that kind of doesn't fall in line with that, it's just kind of like a wound, you kind of cut into it. And then, so it's how to properly care for that wound. So maybe it's not hypersensitive or desensitive but it's just injured. I guess, am I understanding you right? And
just to cut back to something that you said a moment ago, I think it's interesting that people that don't deploy suffer a higher suicide rate.
Mm-hmm.
Why might that be the case? It's counterintuitive to me.
I know. When I first saw that statistic, it surprised me too.
And so, just to clarify, by don't deploy, this is someone that has never gone overseas but is in active military service.
Yeah, perhaps they went to basic and then they did not need to be deployed, and then were eventually discharged. Or a lot of people actually get through basic and don't spend a full their full enlistment period, and they leave for reasons of injury or something else. But yeah, I think people who have not been deployed, veterans who have not been deployed, are at higher risk because you sign up to serve. And when you don't get that opportunity and you see the people that you went to boot camp with and you were supposed to serve with overseas go and serve and sometimes sacrifice or make the greatest sacrifice by giving their lives to that, that in itself can be, there's like survivor guilt there. So that coming home with, or, coming back into civilian life with that is sometimes hard for veterans to live with, and coping with that, and, that putting that incongruence back together.
I mean, they still are serving America. They're just doing it far more conceptually.
Yes.
In a way that you don't feel viscerally.
Yeah. That
when you go and kind of cutting back to something we had talked about earlier about that particular book about serving in Afghanistan. Although the topic of Afghanistan is interesting to me because I do wonder these eternal wars that have lasted longer than the lives of many of our soldiers now. I wonder what impact that has on their psyche compared to something like, the war in Kuwait that had a definitive start, a definitive end, and then we were done. This is something that we just kind of lingered and lingered and lingered. The war was on autopilot for like 3 presidencies.
Yeah. It makes me concerned about, the mental health and, the ramifications of when they come home. And yeah, I've wondered that too. And I don't know if we'll ever have true answers, but yeah.
you are not a policy expert on this issue, but I do want to ask you about it. In a couple different countries, such as Germany, you graduate from high school, there's a mandatory year of military service. Good idea? Bad idea for America? What do you think? Or we're just shooting from the hip here.
Yeah,
We're not marrying you to
yeah,
this
right. I would think, I would say public service. How about, so like whether you want to like join the Peace Corps or volunteer for a year of mandatory or the military, but I definitely think like maybe they could speak more about military in school as a career path too. That was never given to me. So, which is why I never for 1 second considered the military. But I definitely, wish somebody would have taught. Not even my dad talked to me about the military, and he served in it. So I don't think that the military is a common career path for a lot of people.
Where did you go to high school?
Glendale
Here in town.
Yep.
So I went to Marshfield, and there definitely was that discussion in our high school, and we took a test. I can't remember what it was called. Started with an M. This will be on I Messed Up next week. Our next episode. But we took this exam essentially that kind of was testing for
like your aptitudes
of where you would be best positioned in service, right? And I remember taking that test and getting calls and being actively that there was definitely a presence.
So was that
in the high school?
Was that given to like you guys as a class? Or was it you as a person?
No, I remember like we all went in like our junior year and we took this exam. And this is me I'm just recalling this after talking about that, because I remember that being an option and kind of being presented as an option in high school. And it started about the junior year, because then I would get phone calls from recruiters.
I'd never even for a split second stopped to consider it. And I was so fortunate to serve on our previous senator's committee one year, Senator Claire McCaskill. She had a bunch of people from the community serve on a committee that essentially reviewed applicants to West Point and military academies. So I got to read all these recommendations and applications from because a senator can appoint somebody into these academies. And I got to read all of these things and experience these high achieving high school students wanting to go serve our country through education and then becoming an officer. So I just thought that was like, wow, I never knew about these opportunities when I was in high school. How great that these kids do.
Can Absolutely. I ask you really the more empowering aspect of being a veteran? What is it that veterans have that you wish civilians had more of?
Oh, yeah. There's a few things.
Clearly sense of humor. You and I both.
Yeah. But also just this like dedication and hard work ethic. And I'm not saying that civilians don't have that, because I know plenty of civilians who do.
Well, another way to frame this question, brag about our veterans here.
Yeah. I mean, you will not find someone more harder working, more loyal. I love hiring veterans. I love our student veterans. I mean, okay, our student veterans, this is the best because they go to class, and if an instructor cancels class, they're upset. Most students would be like, heck yeah, I get the day off. And no, they're like, I'm paying for this class. I'm trying to learn, and they just take things more seriously, and they understand the weight of what they're doing. So it's just the maturity, maybe. It's really great to see.
It's so funny that you make that point, because we talk about hot button political issues a ton in my class. And, the old phrase, don't talk about politics and religion at dinner. And we'll have this conversation starts coming down the pipeline about, any number of controversial things, from vaccine mandates to border walls, to, some of the abortion related mandates coming out of Texas. And these controversial subjects coming out of the pipeline, you kind of see the class kind of start to slowly get comfortable with the subject. Oh, this is kind of controversial. Then you see the veterans, they're like, oh, this is kind of controversial. They got a little that degree of eagerness for some of those tougher conversations.
Oh, yeah. And, that's funny because, like, even in our academic lab, it is an academic space. So it's, we try to maintain like the rowdiness of it all. But stuff comes up, and it's interesting to balance that, how to have these conversations and encourage, this academic discussion, and also, quiet enough to write a paper because someone's over there in the corner needing some silence.
Absolutely. How many times have you, I imagine dealing with these students on a regular basis, you've got to form some lifetime bonds with so many of them. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah.
Or do they kind of like unplug a bit? OTC was a phase and I'm ready for the next phase.
I don't know if I've necessarily been in this job long enough, this position. I've been here a little less than 4 years, but I think that, I'd like to see, hopefully over more years, I'll be able to answer that question. But I do know that our veterans have lifetime bonds with each other. So sometimes they come in and don't know people, and then by the end, they do. And I kind of even see it in their interactions on Facebook and them kind of talking in between each other. And there are some definite bonds that are built in Veterans Upward Bound.
So you've talked a little bit about some of the PTSD and moral injury. And what kind of programs or is Upward Bound a part of programs on campus to help faculty, to help the people serving those veterans do a better job?
Mm-hmm. So our office is always open to any faculty member or staff member that wants to come in and speak with us about specific student. You don't have to name names, of course, but like advice on working with veterans. We've got currently Veterans Upward Bound is working with the counseling department, and we've got some professional development in the works. We've created a staff resource library. So if somebody ever wants a book specifically working with veterans in higher education, we've got those books available if you're more of a take it home and read it on your own sort of person. But yeah, we are a support for not only veterans, but the faculty and staff that support them too.
I can vouch that faculty can freely walk into Veterans Upward Bound. I can vouch, and you should, because not only does Michelle have a great office, you have a great decorated office. You have all the different military branch flags up. You recently, thanks, according to you, to Dr. Lundstrom, you recently added a Space Force flag, which is my favorite flag of the military. I got a little Star Trek in me. The Space Force flag is great. How beautiful is it looking at that every day?
Okay, that's my favorite flag because a student gifted that to us.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. One of our veterans who really wants to go into, the SpaceX program or that.
Call it Space Force.
It's not Space Force. What's the one?
SpaceX is run
the private company, right? Yes. This is a prior military person who wanted to go into SpaceX, but he liked the Space Force, had the flag, and he was like, I noticed you had it missing, so I brought it for you. I was like, oh, man, you guys are awesome.
Yeah.
There's a lot happening too. NASA is working towards establishing a moon on the base on the moon, and by 2024, I think. And
are you going to live there?
Am I going to live there?
Are you guys going to try to get a spot there?
Think of the kind of dancing you could do on the moon.
I know, moonwalks.
Which it just
for the first time,
full circle.
I think I would finally be good at golf.
Yeah.
I think you'd finally be good at golf. The range of my golf ball.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think the putting would be difficult.
Oh, yeah. I hadn't thought of that. I was just thinking sheer force.
So your lofty aspirations of going to the moon are about improving your golf game.
All I know is that I've had the joy of finally getting it. Now that we have the new golf range here in town, what's that thing called that you can crush it? Big Shots. Now that you got Big Shots, you go Big Shots, which is really great. I really have a great time there. It's pricey, but it's a good time. But I feel I can't hit the broadside of a barn, nor can I hit it to a barn. If that barn is more than 20 yards away from me, I can't hit the darn thing.
Physics, my friend. Right. So impulse is force times time, right? So impulse is the change in momentum. So essentially, you want to get the ball's momentum to change a lot, right? You want to end up with a really high velocity that's going to go farther. So what the advice they always give golfers?
What?
Follow through. What that's about is you're remaining in contact with the ball. You're applying a force to the ball for a longer period of time is going to give you a greater change in momentum. It's going to go farther. Huh. So that's why it really comes down to, what is it? Kinesthesiology. But anyways,
yeah, I always wondered
the
about
form that you're taking and the way you're swinging is super important because you're trying to get more contact time with the ball.
I always wonder about that with it must be the same with basketball too. I'm a lot more familiar with basketball, and they always talk about the follow through after you shoot. How your arm extends afterwards, and if your arm doesn't extend right, the ball kind of that confuses me because the ball is out of your hand, the ball is off your club, but you're insisting that the follow through.
You're talking about in the follow through while being in contact.
Okay,
so the follow through isn't the motion before the follow through is once it strikes the ball, staying in contact with the ball longer to provide a greater impulse.
So, to what degree will I be able to drive a ball on the moon? Do you think?
Oh boy, what's the?
You're the guy.
So what's the?
Is it 1/6?
It's like 1/6, I think.
So 6 times farther.
Well,
six times higher.
It's 1/6.
For me, it would be 6 times higher.
Acceleration due to gravity. So it would work around there.
For me, it would be 6 times higher, but Michelle, but not farther.
You know what they do though on the moon? They make the golf courses 6 times bigger.
Oh,
you're in the same spot.
Everything's scaled away. Oh,
yeah.
That's how the big moon gets you, right?
Like, wow, Andrew, you sucked on Earth. Here. You sucked on the moon.
You lured me here under false pretenses. Now I'm on the moon, and I'm still as terrible as I always was at golf.
So, any thoughts on a hero you'd like to share with us?
I just follow this professional skier on Instagram that I just really love. And I love for everything she stands for. She's kind of a social activist. Caroline, I need to look up her name. I'm going to look it up right.
Peekaboo Street?
Oh, no, it's not. No. Caroline Gleich.
This person's name?
That was a famous Olympian from the 90s.
Yeah, I remember her. I was very...
She won, I think, a medal or two.
Yeah.
Her name is Peekaboo, and her last name was Street.
I think she actually picked her name, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah. As a child, her parents let her pick her name.
Sorry, we interrupted you.
Caroline Gleich. So she is a professional skier, and she's a social activist and very, very involved in climate change, things like that. So really encourage everyone to check her out.
Have you noticed a lot of student activism out of veterans?
Actually, yes. We have some very active veteran students and a lot alumni who even come back and kind of keep us up to date on what they're doing. But I think one of the most... Can I name names on here? Can I say names? Yeah. But Reza Gilman is one of our alumni of OTC and an alumni of our Veterans Upward Bound program. And he loves smoking meat. He was also in our Veteran Lit Mag, and during COVID, he was smoking meat and giving it away and drive-throughs, and you could just drive up and for no money, he would just give you, a smoked ham or whatever. But he was working with a couple local restaurants and doing that. So that's just one example of veterans getting involved.
You and I have shared a few students, obviously, Upward Bound have taken classes of mine, and almost to a man are all phenomenal. But I remember there was a class I almost had to cancel once because it was during a picnic a couple years back. I don't know if it was Upward Bound, but the activity they were doing was arm wrestling. Did you hear that? There was an arm wrestle. The veterans arm wrestled students to challenge them, and a couple of them were students of mine. I would ask them later. I was like, "Was that you guys?" He was like, "Yeah, it was me."
Yeah.
How'd you guys do? This is one of the reasons why I love veterans, because they have absolutely no problem popping their own egos. And he was like, "Oh, we got crushed. We got absolutely crushed. These guys, everybody that wanted to arm wrestle us were the biggest dudes. We did not think that through."
They're like, "Yeah, I beat a veteran today." Yeah. It's like, are you proud?
Yeah, absolutely. Let them win a game or two. But I thought that was fantastic. First of all, that they thought of the idea. Second of all, they actually had the thing that allows you to anchor your elbow and you grab each other's arms.
Oh, like an over the top?
It's like it over the top. Yeah. I don't know if they were spinning their caps, but yeah.
I'm pretty sure you have to if you want to win.
Maybe that was their problem.
Oh, fantastic. Remind me of that acronym again. The biking.
Oh, RAGBRAI.
RAGBRAI.
Yep.
All the work that you do here and all the work that Upward Bound does for veterans, the kind of issues that veterans are facing. Remind me of the skier's name again?
Caroline Gleich.
Caroline Gleich. All of this is new to me. I didn't know that. What about you, Andrew?
I did not know that.
Now you do.
Thank you so much.
Hey,
Thank you.
can I say thank you so much for inviting me in? Because I do feel like I'm in the cool kid club now. Am I in the cool
you
kid
are.
You
club?
are, and that reminds me, something I wanted to start doing. Who would you like to hear on the podcast? Who should we reach out to? Who's someone that's just really interesting? Can be anywhere in the college.
Like this is the podcast version of the Ice Bucket Challenge. She.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, you're.
I nominated
this.
such and such.
I love
and
this.
We
Who should we talk
throw
about?
them into oblivion.
Okay, so
Someone that maybe Andrew and I have no access to or haven't.
So I don't know if you've interviewed this person before, but Jeff Jones with Disability Support Services.
Jeff Jones.
One of my favorite people on campus.
Like ever.
Yeah.
I mean, in the world.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, if
On the
you're
moon.
listening, or if someone that's listening that talks to Jeff, let him know we are going to be reaching out to Jeff Jones
He's also a Ragbri writer, too.
and a fellow Ragbrier. Is that?
Yeah. There's turning out there's a little bit of a Venn diagram
There
with
is,
Ren
yeah.
Bry and with
cool people.
the podcast host
Oh, that too.
alumni. Yes, and cool people as well. You know what? I officially allow you to enter the Cool
Thank
Kids
you.
Club.
Thank you.
I like to think of myself as a bit of an arbiter in that category.
Yeah. Cool.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Michelle.
you.
We really appreciate
Thanks,
it.
guys.